today the topic is around leadership. The Monastic Academy is leadership and awakening training program. How do you train awakened leaders? How do you train people who have deep insight, who truly let go, and who can lead, ideally the world, to a different way of operating? So this question for me is really important. I think over the years I focused a lot on effectiveness and productivity, management, self-directed work, and of course mindfulness and meditation. And it's only in the past year that I've really focused a lot more on this question of not so much self-leadership, but training, how do you train leadership in people? Soryu is particularly very good at this, I would say. So I'm fortunate to have him as a role model and to learn a lot from him. And one of the important points he often talks about is that being a good follower is vital to becoming a good leader. Sometimes leading means following, and sometimes following is leading. And particularly when residents or people first join the monastery, first join the Monastic Academy, we ask them implicitly or explicitly to follow, to not lead. Partly because I think most people's ideas of leadership is warped, and they think it means I have particular ideas, I see other people doing things wrong, I should tell them how to live their life and fix them. Which you could say is a form of leadership. That's not the monastic maple type of leadership we're trying to train. That's the type of leadership that happens a lot in the world, that you could say has also led to this one global culture that dominates everything and has destroyed the diversity of species and cultures and ways of living, so that we just have the right way. We just have one way that's considered right and everyone should adopt it. And so we're trying to train something else. And so when we start, we ask particularly the apprentices and residents to follow. I trained at a few different centers that were even more hardcore about this, and they gave you almost zero instruction. And when I first joined Maple, it was very similar, where there was no orientation week, there was no orientation day, there was no orientation hour. There was just, okay, you're here now. Now it's time to clean the dishes. And then just clean the dishes. And it's strange because over the time we have switched, where now we do this whole week-long orientation week of practices and training. And there's a benefit to that. There's a benefit to thoroughly training people and how do you adopt the culture and understand what we're doing. There's a good transition period entering a community like that. So we did that intentionally, deliberately. But I would also say we lost something in that process. Because if there isn't an orientation week, if there isn't already guidelines and operating principles that we tell you from step day one, then it's up to each person to really pay attention, to take leadership in their own learning. I have to pay attention to how everyone is doing everything all the time, because I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to get corrected. I want to do things correctly, accurately, in alignment with what the community is doing, so I'm not causing other people to have to help me too much. And in that way, they get to develop a sense of empowerment and confidence of, I don't know what I'm doing. No one's telling me how to do things. It's up to me to figure it out. I have to learn what's the right way to set up the table, what's the right way to cook, what's the right way to clean the dishes, what's the right way to mop, and I'll give feedback that I'm doing it wrong every day, almost every hour. That I didn't clean the place thoroughly enough, I didn't set the dishes in the correct way, I'm taking too long, or I'm rushing too fast, and I get feedback from everyone else when I first started about how I was doing everything wrong. And obviously, and as we have done, it would be easy just to tell people, this is how you do it this way, every time. But then we're sort of robbing people of this vital opportunity to have a very low risk, low consequential time when there is a right way to do things that they can know if they pay attention and also receive feedback and empower themselves to know this is important and I need to do this. I don't know how to do it, and yet I got to do it. To me, when I first started, that was the first part of leadership development, was I have to do this. It has an impact if I do it wrong, and no one's telling me how to do it right until I do it wrong. And then I get feedback from the world about how I'm doing it wrong. That was really important for me. Now, fortunately, over the years, the training at Maple, at the Monastic Academy, has evolved. So we have more complexity, we have more trainings, we have more practices. So maybe we don't have to rely on that as much anymore. But to me, leadership means someone has to lead when no one knows what to do. Because if it was obvious, there was already a book that told us what to do, then we would just be following and not want to be leading anymore. That would just be following what we already know is the right way to do things. But the lack of leadership in the world, the lack of leadership in our lives, I think partly comes from this culture that, at least in my generation, grew up with, of there's already a right answer. You can type in Wikipedia or Google and learn everything. How do you cook this meal? What's the capital of this city? How should I live my life? There's just like cajillion things on the internet to answer all of these questions, and their whole industries developed. Billion-dollar industries, self-help, even meditation industries around telling people every step of the way. These are the 10 steps to become a millionaire. These are the 10 steps to find your partner. These are the 10 steps to heal your trauma. These are the 10 steps to get enlightened. And, it doesn't work, as far as I know. Not necessarily because the steps are wrong. The steps could actually be right. But the hard part isn't following steps. The hard part is being in the complete unknown, being completely vulnerable, feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try this. Should I keep doing this? Or should I stop because it doesn't seem like it's working? Or should I try this other thing? The people who have the courage and the humility and the wisdom to be willing to throw themselves into those kinds of situations where they might get it wrong, probably going to get it wrong many times, going to get it wrong more times than they're going to get it right in the beginning. That's how leadership actually develops. And it's interesting, as I look out at our group, I notice in myself and other people, there are certain people that are very good at directing themselves, being productive with themselves. There are certain people that are good at managing, good at project management, managing, say, a retreat, or managing a garden, or managing a meal to make sure it happens. And then there's leadership. And it's only until recently that I really started questioning, what's the difference between management and leadership? Or productivity, effectiveness, excellence, and leadership. Why did Soryu call this a mindfulness and leadership development program? Why are there so many programs around leadership? Why is that the word everyone fixates on and not, say, management? Productivity or something. in my experience, management covers achieving a certain goal, a certain project, and we have a certain end goal we're trying to hit. But leadership means working with people. If it was just one person in a company, I don't think we'd call them a leader in that company because there's just one person. If there are two partners running a company together, equal power, wouldn't say that they're a leader. A leader mainly works with people, I would say. How do you get the best out of people so that they can achieve things without needing to give them step-by-step instructions, without necessarily knowing yet what the end deliverable or product we're looking for is? Because that would be management. Sometimes we need management, so we have someone like a retreat manager whose job is to make sure the retreat goes well and the guests have someone to go to if there's a problem. But if I can be honest, I'm the leader, especially when Sori is away, of the Vermont location, and my job is less about making sure we get certain end products done, although that's partly my job, but as little as possible. My real job is to make sure everyone, particularly the senior residents, but everyone is following the mission and empowering themselves as much as possible to take skillful action to fulfill our mission or our goals or our intentions, aspirations, either in the long term or just in a week or in a month or in the year. And that requires a lot of not knowing. It takes a lot of owning everything. And so for me, the most vital skill in leadership is ownership. And this also shows up in our own meditation practice, our own mindfulness practice, in our own self-leadership of not waiting for someone else to solve the problems for me, but taking ownership of everything. If I'm meditating and it's cold, okay, maybe I can turn up the thermostat, but that's not an option, then I'm just going to take ownership of this problem and learn how to work with it. If my mind is distracted and sleepy, that's not a problem about someone else. That's my challenge. That's my opportunity. Whatever is happening, rather than being the victim, the passive subject, passive object of this experience, I will empower myself to take leadership and learn, how do I work with this scenario? How do I work with this situation? And so when we're meditating on a cushion, the first step is I am the center of this universe. I am the one. My actions matter here. What I do with my mind, what I do with my body, how I think, how I practice to focus my attention have an impact, rather than being the victim of whatever happened before or is happening in the room or might happen in the future. The first step is taking ownership, regardless of whether or not maybe someone else is partly to blame, but that's a disempowering move to say, well, it's that person's fault, therefore I can't do anything until they change. Instead we say, no, I'm going to take ownership of everything. I'm going to take ownership of the entire organization. I'm going to take ownership of my life. I'm going to take ownership of the entire world. Obviously, in my experience for myself and watching other residents and other people move through this challenge, a natural block that comes up is, well, A, I can't do that, and B, if I did take ownership of my life or the world or other people or a group, then I might do something wrong because I don't know what I'm doing, and then I'll cause harm. It's bad to take leadership if you don't know what you're doing, because then you might potentially harm yourself or other people. And this is, rightly so, a huge question. I remember early in my training asking Soryu, what if you have two options as the leader? One option, you might say hurt 100 people, and another option, you might hurt 200 people, and you don't really know which one is which. And they both seem like bad options. What do you do? I don't remember his response, actually. But I think the most important fact was that I was in that dilemma. So I have sympathy for people who move into that dilemma of seems like you can't take leadership because then I might make a poor decision and might negatively impact a lot of people. That's fair. So out of compassion, we don't want to hurt people. But the problem is that the people who do take on leadership, the people who often are running the world, are the ones who don't have those qualms, who aren't worried about, aren't so sensitive or so concerned about potentially harming other life or other people. And so at Maple, for example, we say we're training leaders in these skills of wisdom, love, and power, that it's important that people learn, how do I be wise? How do I let go of my own fixed opinions of what's right and what's wrong, so that I'm willing to receive and be humbled by life about what's actually true, what's actually skillful, what's actually beneficial. How do I have compassion and love so I can place those who I don't necessarily identify with or I'm not attached to as valuable, to see the worth and care and concern of even those people, which might include the sky or the trees or the insects, that I might not identify with or normally care about. And the power of how do I actually bring about change, primarily through keeping what is most important steady in my mind, and thereby able to influence other people to also consider and take on what is most important in their mind. This is obviously a challenge, and integrating these three skills is very difficult. But in the world today, where we have so much power, or at least some people, certain cultures, certain societies, certain species like humans, have so much power, learning how to also have the wisdom and love of considering maybe the ways I think are correct aren't so correct, and I'm willing to be humbled and learn what's actually true, what's actually helpful. Maybe the things I care about is still too narrow. Maybe I need to expand the scope of what I care about. And on the flip side, maybe I need to empower myself more. Maybe I need to be willing to make mistakes, to possibly hurt people. Not because we want to hurt people, but because that's the way we learn, is by making mistakes and the willingness to be humbled and lead in that way. And if there's one thing that the modern culture does a really good job at, is giving people excuses to not take ownership. To put people in passive positions where life just happens to them, and they don't ever have to own a big problem. College is basically a joke. It feels really important, but for most, at least when I was in college, it's not a real problem. It's not a real challenge. And so at Maple, at least, we give people real challenges, and we will hammer people disproportionately to the situation to give them a taste of, no, this really matters. It's easy to say, How I chant doesn't really matter. How I sit doesn't really matter. How I eat my meal doesn't really matter. How I talk to people doesn't really matter. I'm free. I'm an individual. I should have to do what I want. Isn't that what real freedom is? But no, that's basically disempowering. That's not taking ownership of how my life matters, how my life has impact. Not willing to receive feedback and be humbled by life and our friends and our loved ones. And instead taking the ownership that it all really matters. It really matters. And being in this position of, I don't know what to do, how to do this, and yet someone has to do something. This is a very uncomfortable position for a lot of people, and I think in our culture we've sort of abstracted it out so that we never have to face that much, and when we do, it's a horrible experience. Public speaking, moving your house, looking for a new job, changing careers, These are all experiences people report as the top 10 worst things in their life. And that's a real shame, because the next few decades, I would say, are going to be filled with huge challenges where no one knows what to do, how to navigate, and we're going to have to do something. And of course, the truth is that's already true in our lives. We always have to do something, and we don't always know what that is. And rather than waiting the next day for someone else to tell us the solution, rather than waiting for the next day when things are better, we can learn to take ownership of, I'm going to live fully today, in this moment, to the maximum extent of my possibility. Not out of shame, not out of self-hatred or something, not out of some weird sense of expectation or something, but it actually feels good. It feels good to be fully alive. It feels good to take full ownership of our lives. That's what the Spirit in us wants to do. We want to live fully. We want to take ownership of our lives. And to the extent that we've cultivated wisdom and love and power in ourselves, we can take that on with groups, take that on for others, with others. And so, there's one thing I would say about leadership, especially for us in our meditation practice as a meditation community, is that it starts on the cushion with, can I even intention of what am I doing in this half-hour sit? Do I have the self-leadership to be the active agent that says, we're going to work on this thing, following my breath, listening to sounds, generating self-love, cultivating compassion? Or instead, do I let the world just dictate what I ought to do moment to moment? I just jump from this distraction to this distraction to this distraction and hope that something will rescue me one day. The leadership begins on our cushion, in our meditation of, can I direct my mind? Can I direct my mind? Can I give my mind a direction? If we can't do that, then everything else isn't really true leadership. Everything else is just, I have ideas, I have enough privilege and power and luck that I can tell other people what to do. And these ideas, these patterns, these distractions are actually leading me. I'm being used by the world's delusions, world's addictions, working through me to change other people. Thoreau often says, or used to say, that he had more power than the President of the United States. Which all of us were kind of like, what are you talking about? That's the stupidest thing to say. But what he meant to say by that was that he actually had control, to whatever extent, of his mind. Whereas even those with great power in the military or in political office are still more or less just following cultural programming of what is right, what is wrong, what they're supposed to do. And they're not going to likely generate radical, revolutionary, new ways of governing, new ways of living, new ways of doing things. And because of that, because they're not revolutionary, the existing system gives them power, because they are a slave to the existing system. So of course, they'll get power from the existing system. But that is not true freedom, that is not true leadership, that's not true power. It looks like power, it looks like leadership, but that's just being the best slave in a system. And so it looks like, for most of us, from our point of view, if we look at a Gandhi or a Jesus or a Buddha, they seem like they're the most impoverished, the most abused, the most oppressed, the least free, the least powerful. But in fact, that fear of being broken, of being martyred, of being impoverished, of being homeless, of being alone, to willingly, voluntarily choose that is the most powerful action, is the most powerful way of being, because they have control over their mind. They're not controlled by the fear of crowds. They're not controlled by the fear of political oppression. They're not controlled by the fear of dying. And so in a meditation community like this, it's crucial and revolutionary that we can cultivate this skill of self-leadership, of I will purify my mind of these defilements, of these delusions, of these stories that are not actually serving me, or actually using me to serve a system. I can purify my mind of that. And having purified my mind to whatever extent, I can live a radical, different type of life that can be a role model to my parents, to my kids, to my loved ones, to my friends. That we don't have to be enslaved by the system. That it's actually possible to live in a different way that's more freeing, more powerful, is not based on getting things from the system, but in fact is based on not needing, not being a slave. That I have everything I need right here. I might like more, I would welcome more, but I don't need more. This is an empowering step, and it starts on the cushion by taking ownership of our entire lives. Not waiting for the system to change, not waiting for the system to give me good grades, or good job, or good pay, or good experiences, or good happy states, but by taking control of our minds. And of course, that's still a beginner step, and as we progress along the path, we learn to let go of our minds, we let to let go of ourselves, and we fall deeper and deeper into a relinquishment and surrender that's beyond ourselves. But at least in this beginning part of the path, learning how to wrestle control of our minds from the systems, from the cultural delusions that have been implanted in us, these viruses and malware that were installed in our psyche, that's a revolutionary act, and that is the beginning step of leadership. And to the extent we've cultivated that, we can be trustworthy to lead other people, that you don't have to worry so much, that the leader has, to whatever extent, purified these delusions in themselves, purified their enslavement to these delusions, and therefore can trust relying on them, leaning on them, giving away your own power to become a true follower so that you can enter that abyss of not knowing, purify the delusions in ourselves, and then become a true leader ourselves. This is a great gift a community can offer, a great gift that a teacher can offer, a great gift that friends can offer each other. And I would say, in this time that we're living in, as it seems like systems that have been eating the world the past several hundred or thousands of years don't seem to be sustaining and will probably break, learning to find some nourishment and leadership, not relying on a slave relationship to these systems, is going to become more and more important, more and more necessary, and more the only option. And that way we can be grateful and appreciative that maybe this is a great opportunity and not merely a great source of grief and fear.